Those of you that have maybe heard some things about DevOps already have perhaps heard some pretty wild claims about it, and kind of very quickly here try and dispel one or two of those myths. The first one, that DevOps is that silver bullet. I've been in IT 30 years, and I've seen people worship a hell of a lot of silver bullets in 30 years. And DevOps is no more a silver bullet than some of these others. Like every approach to IT, it's if it's done properly, if it's done correctly, it's going to work. It's going to improve things, but it's not something that you can just pour onto your IT and to your organization and suddenly it's going to work overnight. As with everything, it's got to be there's got to be some work put in before we hit the success. A lot of DevOps originally, less so in the last 2 to 3 years for certain. A lot of DevOps was focused on tool sets, and automation is a massively important part of what DevOps is about. But it's not just about the tool sets. I've talked to 1 or 2 organizations and they've said, oh yeah, we're starting to do DevOps, we're starting to look at it. And I've said, so what sort of value streams are you working on? Well, we've not actually got that far yet. We've kind of implemented Jenkins and Docker, and we've got Git, and whoa. It's just not all about the tools. In the same way that having stand-up meetings isn't going to make you an agile organization overnight, then just putting some of the tool sets in place isn't suddenly going to make you a DevOps. Bring about a DevOps culture and practices in your organization overnight. Important, but not everything. DevOps isn't a team. I think, again, I've seen 1 or 2 organizations where they've basically said, right, what we're going to do is get rid of silos, and we're going to get rid of development and operations, and we're going to have DevOps teams. Well, hang on, aren't they other silos? And then they end up with 3 silos in their organization: development, operation, and DevOps. And the DevOps team then becomes a very, very useful ally to dev and operations, somebody to blame and somebody to dump stuff on that they don't want. So please, DevOps isn't a team of people, and that's not something that you should ever be doing in your organization. In the same way that Agile isn't anarchy, DevOps isn't anarchy, there's got to be good governance around release in your organizations. If you're in highly regulated industries, then suddenly, because you're doing DevOps, that regulation doesn't disappear. So never ever think of DevOps or Agile and self-organizing teams. Now, these things are only self-organizing within boundaries that you set. So don't ever think that DevOps or Agile is going to be an area where you suddenly have got the shackles are off completely and there are no limits, because there are always going to be limits. And I think one of the most important ones, it's very easy to listen to and go to DevOps summits and listen to organizations talk. But as I was saying to people for years around ITIL and around project management, PMI prints, there isn't one size that fits all in an organization. In the same way, there was no one way to implement change management in ITIL. There was no one way to implement the development lifecycle. There was no one way to implement a project management office. There's no one way to start to adopt DevOps practices in an organization. So, you need to be really, really careful that what you do is absolutely right for you and your organization.